Hello everyone, my name is Zahra Balador. I'm going to speak about understanding of the potential to reuse and recycle building materials in New Zealand. This paper looks at the behavior of three key construction industry stakeholder groups in New Zealand: architects, builders, and consumers, and was conducted through the lens of the theory of planned behavior by the means of an online survey questionnaire. The construction industry is responsible for a large portion of waste. A report by Rebri notes that designers, architects, and engineers can have a significant influence on waste reduction during the design stages of a project. The demand for reclaimed and recycled building materials is directly and indirectly dependent on government policies, clients, designers, contractors, and developers. Understanding people's attitudes and behaviors toward environmental issues could be a starting point for change. This study adopts the theory of planned behavior for behavior and the new environmental paradigm for the environmental attitudes of New Zealanders. Attitudes may influence behavior when it comes to decreasing waste levels in construction. Predicting environmental behavior is an evolving area of research. The most relevant factors to consider in the theory of planned behavior are attitude, subjective norm, and perceived behavioral control. Based on the findings of other studies supporting the theory of planned behavior, these three factors have an influence on behavior via intention, but the perceived behavioral control factor also has some direct influence. Based on some studies, attitudes and perceived behavioral control have a positive influence on people's behavior, but subjective norm plays a limited role. In this study, three groups of stakeholders participated: 159 architects, 160 builders, 144 consumers, from three cities of Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch as the largest cities in New Zealand. Reliability test results were within an acceptable range for measuring attitudes. A stepwise linear regression analysis was done separately for each group of stakeholders to show the models of behavior. The relevant factors were attitude, subjective norm, and perceived behavioral control and intention. Attitude was measured by the new environmental or ecological paradigm scale, which is called NEP scale. The subjective norm can be defined as an individual's perceptions of general social pressure to perform a behavior. For perceived behavioral control, Krochner used Agden's definition of perceived behavioral control in his research as the person's belief as to how easy or difficult performance of the behavior is likely to be. Intention is to find a determinant that can be a plan for the behavior that in conjunction with other factors enables the person to perform environmental behaviors. A 5-point Likert scale was used as a common way of measuring attitudes, and scores have been calculated through using the average score of each section for each respondent. Then results were analyzed by regression analysis. In the group of builders, women and builders with a bachelor degree had a more environmentally friendly attitude. As the primary predictor of behavior of builders, intention was examined as a dependent variable with all other components as independent variables. Subjective norm and NEP were found to be statistically significant predictors of intention 1. Intention 2 was also predicted by NEP. Then behavior was examined as the dependent variable and all other components as independent variables. Behavior 1 could be predicted by intention 2 and NEP in order of importance. Behavior 2 was predicted by intention 2. The The same process of analysis was done for both groups of architects and clients. Architects didn't show any statistically significant difference regarding their socio-demographic data. NEP and perceived behavioral control were found to be statistically significant predictors of intention 2 and behavior 1 and 2. And intention 1 was only predicted by NEP. Perceived behavioral control also had a direct influence on the behavior 1. In the group of consumers, people with more than 65 years old had the most positive attitude, and those aged between 30 to 49 had the least positive attitude. In this group, only general reuse and recycling behavior can be predicted by NEP and intention 1. Intention 2 can be predicted by NEP and subjective norm, but it cannot predict reuse and recycling in building construction practice. For the conclusion, we can say that the most important predictor components were the intention of using reclaimed and recycled building materials and environmental attitudes. Results showed that architects do more reuse and recycling in their personal lives as well as in practice. Builders do less general reuse and recycling, but consumers do less reuse and recycling in building construction practice. Architects with stronger environmental attitudes have stronger intentions to do more recycling or buy more recycled materials. However, their intentions for doing these behaviors are also influenced by the cost of these materials. Also, when architects know more about regulations and certificates, they do more of these pro-environmental practices. For builders and consumers, subjective norm is a more important influential factor on their behavior than architects. The reuse and recycling behavior of consumers in building construction is not predictable by these factors. Knowing the environmental attitudes is important for predicting the behavior of all. Policymakers can enhance perceived behavioral control by increasing designers' awareness of waste management through changes in legislation and through educational programs, since a key barrier to environmental practices is the lack of training and expertise in the construction industry. Educating architectural students for design for disassembly could lead to enhanced use of reclaimed and recycled building materials in the future. Educating contractors and encouraging them to use these materials is probably a role for government. Cost was the concern of everyone when choosing a product, whether or not it was recycled. Communication via a good network between stakeholders could solve many problems and result in understanding the financial benefits, environmental impacts, and market demand more easily and in a timelier manner. The various policies, guidelines, and studies of government and other institutions have resulted in scattered information which is difficult for all stakeholders to comprehend. Such information needs to be gathered into a comprehensive and inclusive platform that is accessible for all.